So you said you can just return a/b, right? Here. Well, to get the value back out from a function, you can either store them in a variable and then print that variable, or do whatever you want with that variable, or you can just directly use the value, because average x, y is actually also just the expression, right? By the time it's computed, it's just going to end up becoming a double. It's going to just end up as a decimal number. So there's nothing stopping you from directly using it to print at like a print statement, for example. So any questions so far? You'll be using a lot of functions in the future, don't you worry. And class number 11 is supposed to be like a complex version of functions, where a function calls itself over and over again. So it's actually like pretty hard to understand, especially if you're first learning how to code. So it makes sense that we're not supposed to cover it in this class, but they made it. So and then they're like not telling me what I'm supposed to do with it. So it's so confusing. All right, let's see how this code runs. Okay, this is the function. This is the code. When you run 1.1, 2.1 for as x and y, like you just declared x and y to be 1.1 and 2.1, right? Then you call the function double average equals average x comma y. So you're trying to declare the variable average, and that value is just average x comma y. So when you call the function, add caller, x and y is 1.1 and 2.1. But what happens is that when you call this function, a and b actually becomes 1.1 and 2.1. X and y no longer exist inside of average, okay? X and y no longer exist at all. The only thing that matters right now is a and b, and those values are exactly 1.1 and 2.1. This means if you change a and b inside of this function, it won't change x and y. And that's really important. If you just changed random values here, and then those values suddenly changed, like outside of the function, that'd be pretty bad, right? You wouldn't be able to use those variables to do any kind of math. So luckily, that's not the case for us. So when you pass in x and y, a and b becomes 1.1 and 2.1. It does the math for you. Return becomes 1.6. And then when you return 1.6, that value is literally the right side of this equation, literally just gives 1.6. And then that 1.6, so it just declares average of 1.6.